What if the secret to being remembered forever had nothing to do with being loud, successful, or even likable? The truth might surprise you, and it might change everything about how you show up in the world. Most of us spend our lives chasing recognition. We want to be noticed, appreciated, valued. We believe that if we just achieve enough, say the right things, or impress the right people, we'll finally matter. But here's what the ancient Stoics understood that we've forgotten. Being unforgettable has nothing to do with any of that. The people who leave the deepest marks on our hearts aren't necessarily the most talented or the most successful. They're the ones who mastered something far more rare. They mastered themselves. They understood that true impact comes not from what you have or what you've done, but from who you choose to be in every single moment. Today, we're exploring 6 Stoic principles that transform ordinary people into unforgettable ones. These aren't tricks or tactics. They're profound truths about human nature that have stood the test of millennia. If you're ready to discover what truly makes someone impossible to forget, then stay with me. And if this resonates, hit that like button. It helps Stoic wisdom reach others who need this message. Principle 1. Mastering your inner storm. Picture this moment. Someone says something that cuts right through you. Maybe it's unfair criticism. Maybe it's a personal attack disguised as honesty. In that instant, every fiber of your being wants to explode, to defend, to attack back, to make them understand how wrong they are. Most people give in to that impulse. They let the storm inside them rage outward, creating chaos everywhere they go. But what if you could do something different? The Stoics called this hegemonikon, the ruling center of your mind. It's the part of you that can observe your emotions without being controlled by them. When someone provokes you, you feel the anger rise. That's natural, that's human. But between that feeling and your response exists a space, a sacred pause where your true power lives. Between stimulus and response lies your freedom. Think about the last time you witnessed someone remain perfectly composed while everyone around them lost their minds. Maybe it was during a crisis at work. Maybe it was a family argument that spiraled out of control. That person who stayed centered, who spoke with clarity instead of rage, who brought temperature down instead of escalating it. You remember them, don't you? That's because emotional mastery is magnetic, not the fake kind where you suppress everything and pretend you're fine. I'm talking about genuine regulation, where you feel the full force of your emotions but refuse to let them hijack your behavior. You acknowledge the anger, the hurt, the frustration. You let it move through you like weather passing through an open sky, and then you choose your response with intention. Epictetus taught his students a powerful exercise. When someone insults you, imagine they're commenting on a painting you're holding, not on you. The painting might be ugly, but that doesn't make you ugly. Their words reveal their perception, not your reality. Here's a scenario. You're in a heated discussion and the other person crosses a line. The old version of you would have matched their energy, raised your voice, said things you'd regret. But the person who masters their inner storm does something radical. They become quieter as things get louder. They slow down as things speed up. They bring stillness to chaos. This isn't weakness. This is the ultimate power move. Because when you refuse to be dragged into someone else's emotional hurricane, you're demonstrating something they desperately wish they had: control. Not over them, but over yourself. And people never forget someone who showed them what true strength looks like. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, wrote in his private journals, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." He understood that responding to chaos with more chaos only multiplies suffering. Responding with calm mastery multiplies respect. When you master your emotional weather, you become a refuge for others. People feel safe around you because they know you won't explode unexpectedly. They trust you with their own vulnerabilities because you've shown you can handle your own. This creates bonds that last lifetimes. Every time you pause instead of react, every time you breathe instead of bite back, every time you choose composure over chaos, you're carving yourself into someone's memory, not through force, but through the rare and beautiful power of self-command. Principle 2, the forgotten art of receiving someone fully. When was the last time someone really listened to you? Not the polite nodding kind of listening where they're clearly just waiting for their turn to talk. Not the distracted kind where they're glancing at their phone every few seconds. I mean the kind of listening that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world that matters in that moment. Rare, isn't it? We live in the age of the half-present. We're physically here but mentally scattered across a dozen different concerns. We're in a conversation while simultaneously composing our response, checking our notifications, and thinking about what we need to do later. This fractured attention has become so normal that when someone gives us their complete focus, it feels almost shocking. The Stoics practiced something they called prosoche, attention or present awareness. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and nowhere is this more evident than in our conversations. While someone is sharing their heart with us, we're lost in our own mental movies, barely catching every third sentence. But here's what happens when you truly listen. You give someone a gift so rare in modern life that they'll remember you for years. You make them feel seen, heard, valued, not for what they can do for you, but simply for who they are. Real listening isn't passive. It's one of the most active things you can do. It requires you to silence the constant commentary in your head, to resist the urge to interrupt with your own similar story, to set aside your judgments and solutions, and to simply receive what's being offered. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Nature's reminder to listen twice as much as we speak. Think about someone in your life who really listens to you. How do they make you feel? Chances are you feel valued, understood, less alone. That person has done something profound. They've created a space where you can exist without performance, without editing, without fear. Now imagine being that person for others. Imagine what would happen if in every conversation you had, you brought your full self to the table. Not the distracted, multitasking version of you, but the fully present, deeply attentive version. Here's a practice. In your next conversation, notice when your mind starts preparing your response while the other person is still talking. Notice when you start to drift toward judgment or advice giving. Simply notice it without guilt and gently bring your attention back to their words, their tone, their emotional undertones. What are they really saying beneath what they're saying? The ancient philosopher Zeno taught that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen more than we speak. But modern culture has inverted this wisdom. We're rewarded for being articulate, for having opinions, for speaking up. Listening has become undervalued, seen as passive or submissive. But the Stoics knew better. They understood that deep listening is how we access wisdom we don't yet possess. Every person carries knowledge we don't have, perspectives we haven't considered, experiences that could teach us something vital. When we listen with genuine curiosity, we're not just being kind, we're being strategic about our own growth. And people sense this. They sense when you're truly interested versus when you're just being polite. They can feel the difference between someone checking a box and someone genuinely trying to understand them. That difference is what makes you unforgettable. Think of it this way. Most people spend conversations lobbying for agreement or validation. But when you show up as a genuine receiver, as someone who can hold space without needing to fill it with your own agenda, you become a rarity, and rare things are treasured. The person who listens deeply sees patterns others miss. They understand motivations that remain hidden to casual observers. They build trust faster because people intuitively know they can be vulnerable without being judged or fixed. This creates a kind of intimacy that doesn't require years to develop. It happens in the quality of attention you bring to a single conversation. So here's your challenge. For the next week, in every conversation, practice being fully present. Put your phone face down. Turn your body toward the speaker. Make eye contact. Ask follow-up questions that show you were really tracking what they said. Notice what happens to the quality of your connections. You'll discover something the Stoics knew well. The art of listening isn't about gathering information. It's about honoring another human's experience as worthy of your complete attention. And that honor is something people carry with them long after the conversation ends. Principle 3, the power of releasing without burning bridges. There's a particular kind of ending we've all witnessed, the dramatic exit. Doors slammed, final words hurled like weapons. The need to make sure everyone knows exactly how wronged you were, how justified your anger is, how much they'll regret losing you. We've been taught that standing up for ourselves means making noise, that letting someone go quietly means we didn't care enough or we're weak. But the Stoics understood something most people never grasp. The most powerful exits are the quiet ones. Imagine this: a relationship ends. It could be romantic, professional, or a friendship that's run its course. The typical human response is to seek closure, explanations, apologies, some kind of final accounting that makes sense of everything. We want to understand why. We want them to understand why. We want desperately for the ending to feel complete. But Marcus Aurelius wrote something that cuts through all that noise. Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. He understood that grasping at things that are already gone only prolongs our suffering. The relationship ended. That's the reality. Everything else is just us arguing with what is. When you can let something go without needing the last word, without needing to punish or explain or make them see your side, when you can simply say, "This isn't working anymore," and walk away with grace, you demonstrate a level of emotional evolution that's unforgettable. Think about someone who walked away from you without drama, no guilt trips, no parting shots designed to wound. They just left with dignity, with clarity, with a wish for your well-being, even though they were no longer going to be part of your life. How did that make you feel about them? Probably a mix of things, maybe some relief, some sadness, but also a deep respect. Because on some level, you recognize that it takes enormous strength to release someone without trying to destroy them on your way out. It takes a person who has dealt with their own pain instead of needing to export it onto others. The ultimate measure of strength is how you leave what no longer serves you. The Stoics practiced something called amor fati, love of fate. This didn't mean being passive or accepting mistreatment. It meant recognizing that some things are meant to end, and fighting against that ending only creates unnecessary suffering for everyone involved. Here's what most people don't understand. When you release someone peacefully, you're not letting them win. You're not being a doormat. You're making a sovereign choice about your own peace. You're saying, "I refuse to corrode my own character by becoming bitter, vengeful, or obsessed with making you hurt the way I hurt." That's power, real power, not the performative kind that needs an audience. The quiet kind that needs only your own self-respect. Let's be practical. Someone betrays your trust. The immediate impulse is to make sure everyone knows what they did, to warn others, to punish them through social consequences, and maybe in extreme cases involving genuine harm, there's a place for that. But in most situations, that impulse is just your ego trying to salvage something from the wreckage. The person who masters this principle understands that carrying rage is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Every moment you spend plotting revenge or crafting the perfect confrontation is a moment stolen from your own forward movement. The Stoics asked a simple question: is this thought useful? If it doesn't move you toward wisdom, toward peace, toward your own evolution, let it go. When you walk away cleanly, something interesting happens. You leave people with a question mark instead of an exclamation point. They wonder about you. They think about what you're doing, how you're doing. Because most people don't have the strength to leave peacefully, your ability to do so makes you memorable in ways that drama never could. Years later, they'll remember not what you said in anger, but how you chose peace instead. They'll remember that you didn't try to destroy them, even though you could have. They'll remember your restraint, your maturity, your unwillingness to be pulled into the mud. And ironically, by not fighting for the last word, you get the last word, written not in what you said, but in who you chose to be. Epictetus taught that we should make decisions as if we were already the person we want to become. So if you want to be someone who is remembered for their strength, their dignity, their emotional maturity, practice leaving things better than you found them, even when those things are endings. The next time something ends in your life, resist the urge to make it messy. Say what needs to be said clearly and kindly. Wish them well if you can. And then turn toward your own life with the energy you might have wasted on resentment. That's how you become unforgettable, not through the noise you make, but through the peace you choose. Principle 4. Being anchored to something beyond applause. There's a specific kind of person everyone wants to be around, someone who seems unmoved by the opinions swirling around them. Not arrogant, not indifferent, but somehow grounded in something deeper than the need for validation. What makes them this way? Purpose. Not the motivational poster kind. The real kind. The kind that gets you out of bed when you don't feel like it. The kind that makes you say no to things that would dilute your focus. The kind that means more to you than being liked. The Stoics believed that every person has a daemon, an inner genius or calling that's uniquely theirs. Your job isn't to discover what everyone expects of you. It's to uncover what you're meant to contribute and then contribute it regardless of the applause or criticism that follows. Think about the most memorable people in your life. Chances are they weren't the ones desperately seeking approval. They were the ones so absorbed in their mission, their craft, their cause that they didn't have time to worry about who was watching. They had something bigger than themselves pulling them forward. This doesn't mean you need to cure cancer or change the world. Purpose can be raising children with intention, building a business that serves a need you care about, creating art that expresses something true, teaching others what you've learned, fighting for a cause that matters. The specifics are less important than the commitment, the willingness to orient your life around something beyond your own comfort or status. Seneca wrote, "Let all your efforts be directed to something. Let it keep that end in view." He was warning against the scattered reactive life, the one where we're blown around by every passing wind of opportunity or obligation. The purposeful life is the directed life. It has a North Star, and here's what's magnetic about that. People can sense when you're not performing for them. They can feel the difference between someone who's trying to be impressive and someone who's simply being faithful to their calling. The latter creates a kind of gravitational pull. People want to orbit around that kind of certainty, even if they don't fully understand it. But let's be honest, finding purpose isn't a weekend workshop. It's often discovered through trial and error, through paying attention to what angers you, injustice you want to fix, and what energizes you, work that doesn't feel like work. The Stoics practiced daily reflection, asking themselves questions like, what did I do today that moved me toward the person I want to be? Here's a practical exercise. Write down everything you spent time on last week. Now ask yourself, how many of those things would you do if no one was watching? If there were no likes, no recognition, no praise? The things that remain on that list, those are clues to your real purpose. The person who lives with purpose isn't swayed by trending topics or popular opinion. They're not frantically trying to keep up with everyone else's definition of success. They've defined it for themselves, and they're measuring their days against that internal standard, not an external one. This creates a paradox. The less you need validation, the more people respect you. The less you chase approval, the more naturally it comes. Because humans are wired to admire autonomy. We're drawn to people who have something we wish we had, which is certainty about their own direction. The person who knows their why can bear any how. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor of Rome, literally the most powerful position on earth at the time, wrote reminders to himself about not being distracted by external rewards. Even with limitless power, he knew that purpose had to come from within, or it was worthless. He asked himself daily, am I doing what I'm meant to be doing? When you live purposefully, you become a mirror that reflects back to others what they're not doing. They see you staying committed when things get hard. They see you passing on opportunities that would pull you off course. They see you building something meaningful instead of chasing whatever's shiny and new. And that consistency, that fidelity to your own vision, becomes part of your identity. People remember the ones who weren't for sale, the ones who couldn't be bought with flattery or derailed by criticism, the ones who said, "This is what I'm about," and then proved it through years of aligned action. So ask yourself, what are you building that will outlast your need for approval? What contribution are you making that matters to you, regardless of whether anyone notices? What would you do with your one wild, precious life if you knew no one was keeping score? The answers to those questions are where your purpose lives. And when you align your daily actions with that purpose, you become someone people can't forget. Not because you demanded their attention, but because you commanded their respect through the integrity of your choices. Principle 5. Radiating stillness in a world of noise. There's a quality some people have that's hard to name but impossible to miss. When they enter a room, the temperature changes, not because they're loud or dominating, because they're centered. They bring with them an atmosphere of calm that makes everyone else exhale a breath they didn't know they were holding. In a world that rewards speed, volume, and constant stimulation, calmness has become radical. It's countercultural, and it's unforgettable. The Stoics called this ataraxia, tranquility or inner peace, but they didn't see it as something you either have or don't have. They saw it as a skill you develop through practice. Every time you choose not to react hastily, every time you pause before responding, every time you refuse to match someone else's chaos, you're building your capacity for calm. Think about the people in your life who remain steady during crises, the ones who don't panic, don't catastrophize, don't add fuel to the fire. You trust them differently, don't you? You know that in an emergency, they're the ones you'd want beside you. That's because calm people create safety, and safety is something we deeply, instinctively crave. But here's what most people misunderstand. Being calm doesn't mean being emotionless. The Stoics weren't advocating for robotic detachment. They were teaching discrimination, the ability to feel your emotions without being controlled by them, to experience anger without expressing rage, to feel anxiety without spreading panic, to notice fear without becoming paralyzed. Epictetus taught that we disturb ourselves by the view we take of events, not by events themselves. Two people can experience the exact same situation and have completely different emotional responses. The difference isn't in what happened, it's in how they interpreted it, what meaning they assigned to it, what story they told themselves about it. The person who radiates calm has learned to question their automatic interpretations. When something stressful happens, instead of immediately reacting, they pause and ask, "What else could this mean? What's within my control here? What would the wise response be?" Here's a scenario. You're in a meeting and someone publicly criticizes your work. The immediate response for most people would be defensiveness, embarrassment, maybe counterattack. But the person who has cultivated inner calm does something different. They feel the sting. They're human. But then they breathe. They create space between the trigger and their response. They might say, "That's useful feedback. Let me think about that and get back to you." That pause, that tiny gap between stimulus and response, is where freedom lives. It's where you reclaim your power from external circumstances and remember that you always, always have a choice in how you respond. And people notice. They notice when you don't take the bait. They notice when you stay grounded while everyone else is spinning out. They notice that being around you feels different, steadier, safer, more spacious. The Stoics practiced daily meditation, but not the kind we often think of. They practiced negative visualization, imagining worst-case scenarios not to worry, but to prepare psychologically. By mentally rehearsing difficulties, they removed the element of surprise and reduced the emotional charge when challenges actually arose. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself each morning that he would encounter angry people, ungrateful people, deceitful people. Not to be pessimistic, but to be prepared, so that when it happened, he could think, "Ah, here's that thing I knew would happen," instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" That simple shift in framing changed everything. Calmness is contagious, and so is chaos. Choose what you spread. You can practice this too. Before a difficult conversation, mentally rehearse staying calm. Before a stressful event, visualize yourself responding with grace instead of panic. This isn't positive thinking, it's practical preparation. You're training your nervous system to default to calm instead of chaos. Another practice, breath awareness. The Stoics understood what modern neuroscience has confirmed, that your breath is the bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind. When you're stressed, your breath becomes shallow and rapid, but you can reverse engineer this. By deliberately slowing your breath, you signal to your nervous system that you're safe, which actually makes you calmer. Next time you feel tension rising, try this. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 6, hold for 2. Repeat 4 times. Notice what happens to your emotional state. You're not suppressing anything. You're just giving your body a different message than the one your mind is sending. The person who radiates calm becomes a refugee for others. In your presence, people feel permission to slow down, to not have all the answers, to exist without the constant pressure to perform or produce. That's a rare gift in our hyperactive culture, and it's one people remember long after the interaction ends. But this doesn't happen by accident. It requires consistent practice. It requires catching yourself before you spiral into reactivity. It requires questioning thoughts that amplify drama. It requires choosing again and again to be the calm you want to see. And here's the beautiful irony. The calmer you become, the more effective you are. Because you're not wasting energy on unnecessary stress. You're not making poor decisions from a place of panic. You're thinking clearly, acting deliberately, and influencing others through your steadiness rather than your noise. So commit to this. For the next 30 days, practice being the calmest person in every room you enter. Not superior or aloof, just grounded. Notice when you're about to match someone's stress and choose stillness instead. Notice when you're about to rush and choose measured pace instead. Notice when you're about to react and choose response instead. Watch what happens. Watch how people start seeking you out when things get difficult. Watch how your presence alone changes the energy. Watch how you become someone others can't forget. not because you fought for attention, but because you offered something far more precious. A moment of peace in a world that never stops spinning. Principle 6. Releasing resentment without ceremony. Forgiveness is probably the most misunderstood concept in personal development. We think it means forgetting, or excusing, or pretending we weren't hurt. But the Stoics understood forgiveness as something entirely different, as a decision you make for yourself, not for the person who wronged you. Think about the last time someone hurt you deeply. Maybe they betrayed your trust. Maybe they said something cruel. Maybe they failed you when you needed them most. What happened to that hurt? Did you carry it with you, replaying the wound over and over, imagining different scenarios where you get vindication or they get punishment? Most of us do this. We become prisoners of our own grievances. We hold on to pain thinking that if we let it go, we're somehow saying what happened was okay. But here's what the Stoics knew. Holding on to resentment doesn't punish the other person, it punishes you. It's like swallowing poison and waiting for your enemy to die. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Not to match their energy, not to return harm for harm, but to rise above it, to become someone who refuses to let another person's darkness dim their own light. This doesn't mean being a doormat. You can set boundaries, you can remove people from your life. You can protect yourself from future harm. But you can do all of that without carrying the weight of bitterness. That's the distinction most people miss. Forgiveness is an inside job. It's you deciding that your peace matters more than your need to be right. It's you recognizing that every moment you spend ruminating on past wrongs is a moment stolen from your present life. It's you understanding that freedom isn't about what happened to you. It's about what you do with what happened. Here's what silent forgiveness looks like in practice. Someone wrongs you. You feel the full weight of it. You don't minimize or deny the pain. But instead of plotting revenge or demanding apology, you process the hurt privately. You talk to a therapist, a trusted friend, your journal. You feel it, examine it, understand it. And then when you're ready, not before, you release it. Not with a dramatic announcement, not with a confrontation where you magnanimously declare your forgiveness. You just let it go. You stop giving it space in your mind. You stop telling the story of how wronged you were. You stop waiting for karma to deliver justice. You simply move forward, lighter. The Stoics practiced an exercise called view from above, imagining themselves as a tiny speck in the vastness of the cosmos, seeing their troubles in proper proportion. From that perspective, most grievances shrink. They don't disappear, but they become right-sized. You realize that in the grand arc of your life, this moment of being wronged is just that, a moment. It doesn't have to define your entire story. People who forgive silently have a particular quality about them. They're not bitter. They don't spend conversations rehashing old wounds or warning everyone about people who wronged them. They've processed it, learned from it, and integrated it into their wisdom without letting it corrode their character. And that's what makes them unforgettable. Because most people can't do this. Most people carry their resentments like badges of honor, constantly reminding others and themselves of how they've been wronged. But the person who has genuinely released resentment radiates something different, a kind of freedom that can't be faked. Forgiveness is the fragrance the violet sheds on the heel that crushes it. Think about someone who genuinely forgave you for something. Not in a performative, I forgive you, but I'll bring it up every argument for the next 10 years way, but truly forgave you and moved on. How did that make you feel about them? Probably a mix of relief, gratitude, and deep respect, because you recognized how hard that is, how much strength it takes to release someone from the debt you feel they owe you. Now imagine being that person for others. Imagine the impact you'd have if you became someone who doesn't hold grudges, who doesn't keep score, who doesn't weaponize past mistakes in current conflicts. Not because you're a saint, but because you understand that forgiveness is how you take your power back. Every day you stay stuck in resentment is a day the person who hurt you still has control over your emotional state. They might not even know it. They might have forgotten the incident entirely, but you're still giving them free rent in your mind, letting them influence your mood, your energy, your capacity for joy. The Stoics asked a simple question: is this thought making me freer or less free? If ruminating on past wrongs is making you less free, and it always does, then it's time to practice release. Not for them, for you. Here's a practice. Write a letter to someone who hurt you. Say everything you wish you could say. Hold nothing back. Then burn it. You're not sending it. The exercise isn't for them, it's for you. It's a ritual of release, a physical act that symbolizes your decision to let go. Or try this. Every time you catch yourself replaying a grievance, pause and ask, what would I rather be thinking about right now? Then deliberately shift your focus to something that serves your present life, a project you're excited about, a relationship you're grateful for, a goal you're working toward. Over time, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching it that past hurts don't deserve the premium real estate they've been occupying. You're choosing, consciously and repeatedly, to focus on what you're building rather than what broke. And people notice this. They notice when someone doesn't carry bitterness. They notice when someone can talk about difficult past experiences without venom or victimhood. They notice when someone has clearly done the inner work to heal and move forward. That's the person everyone wants to be around. That's the person who gets invited into deeper conversations because others trust they won't judge or hold grudges. That's the person who builds authentic connections because they're not dragging the weight of unprocessed resentment into new relationships. Silent forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It means you remember without resentment. You extract the lesson without carrying the pain. You acknowledge what happened without letting it define you. And maybe most importantly, forgiving others teaches you to forgive yourself. Because if you can extend grace to someone who hurt you, surely you can extend it to yourself for your own mistakes and failures. This creates a cycle of compassion that radiates outward, touching everyone you encounter. The Stoics believed that anger and resentment were forms of temporary insanity, moments when we lose our rational capacity and act against our own best interests. Forgiveness, then, is a return to sanity. It's choosing wisdom over reactivity, freedom over bondage, peace over payback. So here's your final challenge. Identify one resentment you've been carrying. You know the one. It's been taking up space in your mind for months or years. Make a decision today, not to forget, not to condone, but to release. To forgive silently, without announcement, without drama. To reclaim that energy for something that actually serves your life. Watch what happens. Watch how lighter you feel. Watch how much mental space opens up. Watch how you stop being defined by what was done to you and start being defined by who you choose to become, despite it. That transformation from victim to victor, from bitter to free, is what makes you truly unforgettable. These 6 principles, mastering your inner storm, receiving others fully, releasing without burning bridges, anchoring to purpose beyond applause, radiating stillness, and forgiving silently, they're not just tactics for being memorable. They're pathways to becoming someone you're proud to be. The Stoics weren't interested in impressing others. They were interested in living with such integrity that their character spoke louder than any words could. And ironically, when you stop trying to be unforgettable and start trying to be true, you become both. So I'll leave you with this question. What kind of person are you becoming? Not through grand gestures or perfect execution, but through the small, daily choices you make when no one's watching. Are you mastering yourself? Are you present with others? Are you leaving things better than you found them? Are you building something that matters? Are you bringing calm or chaos? Are you free or still imprisoned by resentment? Your answers to those questions will determine not just whether people remember you, but whether you respect the person you see in the mirror. And that, the Stoics would say, is what truly matters. If this resonated with you, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps Stoic wisdom reach others who need these reminders. And if you're ready to dive deeper into Stoic philosophy, check out the next video on screen. Until then, remember, you become unforgettable not by demanding attention, but by deserving respect. Keep walking your path with intention.